Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And we are grateful to the media houses for being here and for the conversations that we are going to have with you. It is always good to see faith work also covered in the media. We really appreciate you and appreciate your time. I'm here with my team, the team of colleagues and representatives from the different regions. I'll start from my extreme left. I've got Dr. Reverend Didier Wetrango from West Africa. Welcome. I've got Dr. Nontando Hadebe from Southern Africa. I've got Mr. Basto Maggie Farah from the Middle East and North Africa. I've got Reverend Dr. Uzaku Uku Williams from West Africa Anglophone. And I've got Reverend Christiana Saturn Koroma from West Region Anglophone. And I've got Reverend Canon Grace Kaiso from East Africa, and also the Faith to Action Network chairperson. Thank you. You can clap hands. I think for the media partners, just to say why we are here and just to reaffirm who we are faith actors for justice, faith actors for gender justice. If you see us all in this room, we believe that gender equality is possible, and we've got a role to play in our lifetime to start working towards gender equality. So faith actors, did I introduce myself? My name is Zanele Makombe. I'm the representative of the steering committee member of the Faith Actors for Justice. The Faith Actors for Justice steering committee members are made up of Faith to Action, which is the steering committee member. We've got Bread for the World. We've got ACT Alliance. We've got ACT Ubumbano, and we've got EHIA. Thank you. Just to say, the Faith Actors for Justice meeting, it started off over 2 years ago when faith communities came together and said, how do we also contribute in the discussions around gender and gender equality? We were tired of being called gatekeepers in our own communities, and we said, how do we go back and make sure we bring about the change within our settings? So how do we make our congregations safe spaces and inclusive spaces for everyone? So over the last 2 years, we've been developing this program, and also we've had online consultations where we had discussions on gender issues, where we had theological reflections, where we discussed the protocols, including the Maputo Protocol and a few other protocols. So we also based on our own experiences, what we're seeing in our communities, and also what we are capable of influencing within our own localities. So having done that, we had peer-to-peer learning, and we also went back to our own communities to try and change the situation for women and girls. And also we looked at how do we involve men and boys in our conversations. So after those consultations, this here is the celebration of who we are. And like Bongi said, we're coming here to show and tell what we have done. We've coming here to look at our past journey, to check where we are, and to also look where do we want to go forward. So this is who we are at this particular stage. So these last 2 days, we've been deliberating, discussing, and agreeing and disagreeing in some instances. But in all that, we agreed on particular action points and points where we said, this is where we converge, and this is what we are taking forward as individuals, as institutions, and as any other person who wants to join us and partner with us in this journey. So now I'll hand over to Reverend Uzo to actually read the statement for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And please, it's my pleasure to present to us the Faith Actors for Justice Conference Nairobi Declaration, dated December 2022, This is a statement by concerned African faith actors on women's rights and the Christian church. We, faith actors, gathered here in Nairobi, Kenya, between 28th of November and 2nd December 2022 to celebrate some positive milestones in achieving gender equality in our churches. Also, to have a deep conviction that we need to declare our reflections and call on other church leaders and actors across Africa to review how we understand our calling in the face of gross gender injustice in our countries, churches, communities globally. We realize that women and girls continue to face diverse struggles related to intersecting forms of violence, exclusion, and marginalization, which are linked to gender-based inequalities that undermines women's human rights. This problem has structural and ideological roots in spite of many states having legal frameworks that protects women. The whole of society and all institutions are implicated, including the church, whether actively or passively. We agree that God is a God of love and justice. God created all human beings in God's own image, and thus we are called to be each other's keeper. We acknowledge that our sacred texts are often misquoted and misused to entrench sociocultural norms that promote gender inequality and undermine the dignity and agency of women. Our structures have often excluded women from key decision-making processes. Our churches are not always the safe places or safe spaces God has called us to be. Our theological institutions do not easily reflect or include women, and their curricula remain gender biased and fail to address core social issues such as gender inequality and gender-based violence. We confess that we have not decisively advocated for gender equality or an end to gender-based violence. We have often been complicit by our silence about cultural practices that undermine the dignity and rights of women and girls and promote or condone different forms of gender oppression and violence. We have not acted decisively enough to challenge the existing patriarchal structures and systems, which means we have often been oblivious to the sufferings of women and girls. We further recognize that most of our citizens are people of faith, and thus we have great influence on how they understand themselves, how they understand God, and their relationship with others. The liberation of women is a first step for transforming the world, not just as a human rights project, but as an expression of faith. The author of our faith, Jesus Christ himself, was a champion for justice for all marginalized people, including women. Thus, faith and human rights should be mutually reinforcing spheres. Despite this concern and challenges, we affirm the progress already made by our faith actors and action partners, but there is much more to do. we individually and jointly pledge to commit to the following concrete and practical actions. Individually, we commit to living out the values we claim to be working towards in our daily lives, in our relationships, in our ministries, and being champions for gender justice wherever we are. In our institutions, we will, 1, advocate for people's rights to freedom of beliefs and religion, and resist stigma and discrimination. 2, speak out against gender inequality and gender-based violence from the pulpit and other public spaces. 3, we will adopt contextual and liberatory approaches to Bible study and theology. 4, we will refuse to give credence to exclusionary interpretations claiming religious or cultural grounds in a manner that will incite hatred and violence. 5, we will take concrete actions to make our places of worship and learning space safe and inclusive spaces for all, taking the lead from gender-based violence survivors. And number 6, we will mainstream gender equality and sexual reproductive health in all aspects of the life and ministries of our churches as an urgent priority. Collectively, we commit to establishing a joint collective bodies to enable networking, joint advocacy, shared learning, and mutual accountability. We will break the silence about traditional taboo subjects and support one another to do so. We commit to working towards reviewing our formal and informal theological training to mainstream gender and gender-based violence and build competence in contextual and liberatory Bible study methods. We will support one another to build our church's competence in responding to challenges related to gender, disability, and youth. We will also encourage and support gender-related policy development and the monitoring of our policy implementation. And we will engage in and support more research within and across regions, with a focus on building an evidence-based guide to our work. Finally, we agree to hold one another accountable. Yes, by creating networks of accountability and support, building on existing network structures, by creating a common online solidarity and accountability platform, and lastly, by meeting on a regular basis, that is, if funding permits us, to account to one another, offer peer feedback, and open space for peer learning. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Reverend Dr. Uzo. I'd also want to just check in the room. If you are in agreement that this is our statement, please stand and say, this is our statement. And also on the table, this is our statement. We are all in agreement and we're standing in solidarity. Thank you very much for that. So to my dear partners who are the media houses, I hand over to you now if you've got any questions to ask. So I'll ask my faith leaders to respond to any question that comes from you. Thank you. We'll need a roving mic. Is there a mic? Karen has a question.
Can you describe the process of the online consultations during COVID? Like
Okay.
how many there were and in some more detail?
Okay, thank you. Just to talk about the process of the online learning, the process happened online because it was during the COVID period. So each region had to go through a 7-week training process. In those 7 weeks, we had online session per region, one a day, hey? At least once a week, where each region would meet and they would have reflection on the past work, they would have assignments, and they would have opportunities to ask questions and to also learn on the different instruments, legal instruments, and the context and the Bible. And also, it continued over a period of 7 weeks, and people were allowed to go back home or in their localities and actually start engaging with the different communities before coming back for the next week. Is that it, Karen? Thank you.
Merci. Je voulais simplement savoir si on peut dire un mot. Quelle est la prochaine étape? Pouvez-vous, s'il vous plaît, nous dire quelle est la prochaine étape?
That's a very good question in terms of what is the next steps. Where are we going from here? We are still continuing with the work on the ground in terms of what we have started. Some people are still developing gender policies, and so we're looking at how are we implementing those policies, how are we still engaging within the structures within the faith communities. So we still have work to be done, and we'll still have these meetings since we say it is an accountability platform where we come back and check the progress. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joan. I'm a writer for Debunk Women. And I had a very controversial question based on what you have said that the institution will do. And it's on the second page where you've mentioned that mainstream gender equality, sexual and reproductive health in all aspects of life, and ministries of our church as an urgent priority. I'm just curious of what in terms of community basis, and also in terms of also changing mentality of women, because it's something that now has become inculcated in how we think and how we receive information, especially about sexual and reproductive health as a church.
Okay, thank you. If we've got another question, I'll ask my team to respond to that question. You've got a question?
Oui, en fait, ce n'est pas une question en tant que telle, mais j'aimerais savoir, est-ce que après cette conférence, le réseau, le comité d'organisation du réseau, voit des acteurs qui nous avaient envoyé des lettres d'invitation par le biais de nos églises. Est-ce que ce réseau aura à envoyer un courrier de félicitations et en même temps, dans ce courrier, préciser que nos institutions nous accompagnent dans la réalisation des activités sur le terrain pour qu'elles ne constituent pas d'obstacle pour nous? Parce que parfois, hier, quelqu'un l'avait dit, que nous connaissons très bien nos églises, nos institutions, c'est des institutions conservatrices. Parfois, pour évoluer, il faut vraiment forcer les mains. Est-ce qu'on aura une lettre qui sera envoyée aux dirigeants de nos églises pour d'abord les féliciter de nous avoir permis de participer à cette conférence et ensuite leur demander de nous accompagner dans la réalisation des activités? Merci.
Hello, my name is Dolly Murigi from Hope Media. My question is, what does the church has to say about gender equality? And if we can have, in line with that, someone to talk, to share a success story on gender equality.
Thank you, Dolly. Any other question? And then my panelists will respond. Just to say on the first one, where it was asked what's going to happen in terms of information. So with this statement, since it's an affirmation by individuals and institutions that this is what we want to do, we will send it out and we'll also endorse it by putting our logos, by signing on it, and we start acting on it. Yes, we'll send an email. I commit Faith to Action, our secretariat, that they'll send an email and actually remind us all of what we have affirmed, and then we take it from there. Now I hand over to my panelists to respond to the question, and also the question of where to from here. Maybe you could also touch on that as we are speaking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the question from and sister from the media in relation to mainstreaming gender equality and SRH in the churches. I want to assure you that it has even started. We have what we call comprehensive gender-based violence and SRH that we are continuing to mainstream within the various arms of the church and departments, because we realize that if we don't do that, we will still continue to be where we were. Since we'll be moving on now, we've taken a bold step. And it's very important for the church now to integrate GBV and SRH within the context of the church in the various departments. So it won't be a problem for us because we've started somewhere, and we want to continue to ensure it reaches the top. We're looking at it from bottom-top approach so that we're able to gain the momentum we want to gain in relation to gender-based violence and SRH. So we want to assure you that it's going to be physical and it will be result-oriented at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions. I want to look at the whole issue of gender equality as well as issues of gender-based violence in terms of what the church is doing. A lot is being done by women themselves. And I think at a very deeper level, we who are living in colonial places, we know that scriptures were misinterpreted in ways that justified racism. And so having this kind of legacy, women have been able to understand that it is possible for scriptures to be misinterpreted as it is here in ways that justify the inferiority, the marginalization, and it's also in the statement. So gender equality becomes something that is a corrective measure, so that the fundamental belief that all churches subscribe to is that all human beings are created in the image of God. So if that fundamental belief was upheld, then we wouldn't even be talking, we wouldn't even be here. So it's a question of really going back to our fundamental beliefs and also understanding the reality that the way in which some scriptures have been used to justify the inferiorization and marginalization of women. And then secondly, when we're talking about gender-based violence and saying that we want to mainstream that in the church, this is important because if we open the scriptures, within the scriptures themselves are stories of women being raped. We've got the Tamar story, we've got the story of Dinah, we've got the woman who was chopped into 12 pieces. So we've got those stories within our text that allow for those conversations to be spoken about, for myths to be dispelled. For example, when we think about the story of Tamar, it is such a teaching moment, not only in the church, but in society, because the girl who was raped in a palace, you know, in the king's home. She was veiled, that means she was veiled from head to top. So all those misconceptions that a woman is raped because she's wearing a short skirt or she's out in the night, all of those are disrupted from taking the text itself and then we begin to see how we can use the texts to educate on particularly sexuality, because we know that this is a topic that churches battle with. And so we start with what is there as a conversation, and we begin to draw on the stories of women, their experiences, whether it's in their homes or in the church, so that we actually are informed, as we say here, by Jesus' own view of acknowledging, upholding the dignity of women and saying zero tolerance to any form of violence. So this is where we're coming from, and these are the resources we want to tap into, as well as we mainstream, as we engage, as we have conversations that are at the level of people, so that together men and women can see themselves in their stories. We can begin to say, where do we go to the fundamental belief that everyone is made in the image of God? No one was put on earth to be raped, to be inferiorized, to be beaten. We were all put here to be an expression of who God is. So it becomes almost natural for us to resist gender-based violence and gender inequality.
Yeah.
شكرا لكم على الأسئلة. الكتاب المقدس طبعا هو بينصف المرأة سواء كان في العهد القديم أو في العهد الجديد. في العهد القديم في قضية بنات سلفحاد في سفر العدد أصحاح 36 وعدد 2 بيقول الكتاب: وقالوا قد أمر الرب السيد قد أمر الرب سيد أن يعطي الأرض بقسمة بالقرعة لبني إسرائيل، وقد أمر السيد من الرب أن يعطي نصيب سلفحاد أخينا لبناتي. العهد القديم بينصف المرأة ويديها حقها في الميراث وبيديها حقها في كل حاجة. رب يسوع المسيح في العهد الجديد أنصف المرأة واداها حقها، واحنا شفنا ان كان في خادمات كثيرات حول المسيح كانوا بيخدموا المسيح من أموالهن زي ما بيقول الكتاب. القصة في ظلم المرأة في المجتمع بتتوقف علينا احنا البشر، الفكر بتاعنا، الأيديولوجية بتاعتنا، التربية بتاعتنا، النفسية بتاعتنا. احنا مرات كتير بنتهم الكنايس، لكن الكنايس القادة في الكنايس والكنايس بتنصف المرأة، بتدافع عن المرأة في المجتمع، لكن مرات المجتمع بيبقى مش متقبل الأمر ده. احنا عندنا في مصر متأثرين جدا بالفكر الإسلامي، علشان كده بيبقى صعب ان احنا ندافع عن المرأة، بيبقى صعب. بندافع بكل إمكانياتنا، بندافع بكل قوتنا. تاني بكرر، عشان مش القادة اللي في الكنيسة هم اللي بيظلموا الستات، ولا الكتاب المقدس اللي بيظلم الستات، لكن المجتمع كمجتمع. التربية بتاعتنا بتأثر فينا، العقائد بتاعتنا بتأثر فينا، العائلات بتاعتنا، القبائل بتاعتنا بتأثر فينا. يعني احنا في مصر عندنا على سبيل المثال كتير ما بنعمل لقاءات كقادة دينيين مسيحيين مع شيوخ إسلام. شيوخ الإسلام مش هيتقبل ان المرأة مثلا تكون قسيس، هو مش قادر يقبل كده، مش قادر يفهم كده، مع ان احنا ككنيسة ما عندناش مشكلة. وعلى فكرة احنا في الكنيسة بنساوي جدا ما بين الولد والبنت. ويمكن البعض منكم زار مصر وزار كنايس كتيرة، حتى في المقاعد الولاد مع البنات، في قيادة الترانيم، في قيادة الاجتماعات، في التأملات، في مجلس الكنايس المرأة ليها دور. وما تنسوش ان مصر منها فيها الوزيرة، فيها القاضية، فيها رئيسة البنك، في عندنا كتير في مصر من الحاجات الحكومية اللي فيها المرأة واخدة حقها قوي قوي يعني. واحنا كمان هنكون بندعم القضية دي بكل إمكانياتنا. وبالتأكيد ان المؤتمر ده واللقاء ده مش مجرد لقاء وخلاص، لكن هيكون فعال وهيكون في للأفضل. ونلتقي مرات تانية بنعمة ربنا. شكرا.
And to respond to the question of where are we heading to from now is a very important question. And I want to say that we move from here to a space that is already known, because we are here representing many regions. So it is what we have come to do here. If you look at what we affirmed in our commitment, what we have committed to do is actually a movement. For me, I see us moving like a force that will move from East Africa to West Africa to Southern Africa to the Middle East and to the which other region that is represented here. This is how we are going to move, taking back this message. We all came here with a high level of expectations, and those expectations, I believe, they have been met one way or the other. When we get back, we find there are existing gaps already in our different organizations, in our countries, in our continents, in our regions. These gaps that has existed so long, our coming here will help us to make sure that these gaps are bridged by the messages we are going to take home. I came here with a high hope of expectation, and I am not living the way I came. I'm living better because I have learned from sisters and brothers. I've learned from our collective struggles. I've learned from our challenges. I have learned from best practices from other regions, and I am not going to sit on it. And if every one of us here will go back to what we have committed to do, then that is actually our way forward. That is where we are going to. By the next time we meet each other, whether it is physical or virtual, in any form, all we want to start hearing will be success stories. Stories that has emanated from this meeting, from this conversation. Changes that has occurred in our homes. Because we say that this will have to start with us. This connection, this change must start with me. And it goes ahead to my family, to the society, and to the places you represent. We want to see us as male and female champions who are pioneering the women's rights in our different spheres. Wherever you are, if things are not happening the way you want it to happen or the way it is expected to happen, we must rise and speak. If we don't speak, it is unfortunate, because in so many places, nobody will speak for you. So you have to speak for yourself. So our living here, we are living as people who are now going to be catalysts, change agents, to seeing that gender justice is entrenched in different spheres of our organization. Thank you very much.
I want to add, I just want to add that when you talk about the church, it comes from the community. The people comes from the community into the gathering of people of God gathering together. So, and those communities come from homes. So, as my sister was saying, we don't just focus on the people gathering in the building, but we go beyond the building of the fellowship, because that is the homes, the communities, the societies to which we find ourselves, the offices, the institutions. That is where it has to start. As mothers and fathers, we need to start it from our homes, practicing the gender relation equality in our homes, to ensure that the boy and the girl go together, to know that they are one, and giving the necessary support. And it steps from there into the society, and it comes to the church. The church now gives the support, the backup in relation to what the scripture says, so that people will follow and walk in accordance with it, to ensure there is oneness, love, and unity, appreciation. And at the end result, we see each and everyone growing, living in peace and harmony. So as we look at the church, we sometimes will forget that when we talk about the church, it's not a building per se, but the church is you and I and Jesus Christ, the head, coming together. So that's the church. When we focus on that, then we realize that we are looking at ourselves and not a building per se as a church. So that's what I want to add to what we are discussing here. Knowing that fully well as we are going back, we are implementers. We need to showcase what we have got here by starting from our own families and in the community to which we belong. And at the end, we complex it, we lift it up to the church together. Thank you. And you want to say something?
Just as my colleagues have underlined, what about when we talk about gender justice? We're really talking about mindset change, heart change. It's about transformation. And it also has got to do with the challenges of socialization. And so we are conscious that there are many other centers that are responsible for nurturing our young people, nurturing us. And so we intend to work in collaboration with those centers of formation, centers of nurture. My sister here just talked about the family. We want to be working closely with the families and engaging them and making sure that they're creating spaces for young people to pick up values of justice. We have institutions like our cultural institutions. We would like to engage with their cultural institutions and to examine some of the traditions and practices that continue to hold captive women and their potential. So we want to be working with several centers. The media, for instance, you're key in the process of nurturing society and values in society and shaping society. We will be engaging deliberately with the media to have a conversation about our role and how we, through our profession, can contribute to gender justice. There are other centers of influence that we might want to think about. They are learning centers. We're thinking of examining our curriculum. How is it enabling? How is it actually breaking down some of these negative values? We're hoping that faith communities, particularly, will take their role very seriously and begin to model ways in which women, men can live in a life that has a promising future. So we're talking about partnership here. It's not that it's only this group that will carry out the work. There are so many other centers of nurture that will be engaging in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if the media has follow-up questions. Okay, just to say, we are guided by Jesus Christ, the author of our faith, the one who has shown examples of justice for the marginalized people. And so we also invite any other partner who's willing to walk this path of faith with us so that we create safe and inclusive communities for women. Thank you very much.